Don't worry, we don't bite yet. So,
Speak for yourself.
well, things you learn on this panel. Digital health panel. We're looking at an extremely broad mandate, investment mandate here. We're looking at tools for diagnosing and managing diseases, all the way to innovations that transform and streamline workflows, even consumer-centric solutions that can empower patients to make better informed choices. So it's pretty broad, but we have here on our panel investors, seasoned investors, that whose collective focus spans this expansive landscape. So we'll be sharing some thoughts about some effective fundraising, especially at early stage projects, way to avoid some of the pitfalls that we have seen in the past. Basically recommendations on what to do, as well as recommendations on what not to do. We'll allocate time at the end to get questions from the audience, but I'd like to keep this very informal. If there's a question or comment you wish to make, just raise your hand and we'll call on you and loop you right in. So without further ado, my name is Ron Palivoda. I'm from the Palivoda Group. We're based here in New York City. We're a private investment firm, and we focus on early stage in the life sciences through our health tech fund that is managed by our ventures team. We basically look at projects that have the potential to reduce the cost of healthcare. So I don't want to necessarily cure cancer. My focus is on reducing the cost and making treatment more affordable. Typically, we look at digital solutions with a big data analytics component that can add value to our existing portfolio. So things like projects in the genomics and molecular diagnostics space, as well as some remote health monitoring that can track and that can monitor digital biomarkers. So I know we have a limited time today. I'd like to introduce our three panelists. We have John Gordon from New York Presbyterian, Matt Whitman from Wyndham Venture Partners, and to my left, Jeff Rees with HealthBox Global Partners out of Chicago.
You got it.
All right. Why don't you each take some time and give a broader overview? Go ahead.
Sure. So I'm Jeff Rees, as Ron mentioned, and I'm with a company called HealthBox, as Ron mentioned, out of Chicago. And we originally started in 2010 as a healthcare accelerator. We were a spin out from a company called Sandbox Industries, which managed the venture fund for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they managed about $650 million on behalf of Blues. And we ran kind of these accelerator programs over 3 or 4 years, 3 to 4 month programs in the US, London, Tel Aviv, and went really well. And after doing that, we said, hey, there's a lot of acceleration in the market, we need to do something different. It's kind of shifted us to now where we are today. There's really 2 parts to our business. On one side, we do a lot of innovation consulting for big health systems and health plans. On the other side, we manage strategic venture funds. So most recently, we managed the venture fund on behalf of Intermountain Healthcare, where we invested in healthcare, IT, and service companies everywhere from Series A all the way through growth equity. And now we're in the process of raising 2 new funds, one of which will be another kind of health system-driven LP-based, where we'll invest in healthcare, IT, and service companies, really Series A and seed stage, and then another fund that will invest a little bit later, Series B, Series C, and maybe some growth equity.
Good morning. My name is John Gordon from New York Presbyterian. I don't know if anyone's from out of town, but NYP is a hospital system based here in Manhattan. We have 10 facilities, 2 academic medical centers, actually affiliated with both Weill Cornell and Columbia, which makes us unique among academic medical centers. About 4,000 beds and about an $8 billion top line. Hospital's actually been around since 1771, so we're kind of not a startup. But Ventures itself is actually a relatively new undertaking, about 3 years old at this point for the organization. And what we do is we invest in things out of a $40 million fund that align with our strategic mission for the organization. So we're focused on 5 goals. One is improving the care we deliver for the populations that we serve. Number 2 is getting insight into emerging technologies, whether that's artificial intelligence or CRISPR, all over the map, but things that are going to change the future of healthcare. The third is fostering a culture of innovation within our organization, so encouraging development of innovation within NYP. The fourth is improving external awareness of our innovation activities. And we have a transformation center that fortunately they're responsible for implementing all the stuff that we find. They do the hard work, we get the glory. And then finally, producing a direct and indirect return from our innovation activities, recognizing that when we partner with a startup company, we're creating value for them, and we want to make sure that we're not simply giving all that value away. We should participate in it. And so that's why we deploy the capital. We work with our senior leadership to identify their key priorities and use that to shape our target areas. We're not specific to a specific series. We've invested in C rounds, we've invested in E rounds. It's much more where's that strategic alignment for the institution and what's the best company. That's the other next thing is that we've invested between $500,000 and $2 million in companies, and honestly, that scaled investment does not move the needle in an organization of our size, which is good in our case because that means we can focus on what the best answer is for the problem that we have rather than trying to chase something that has the best valuation or is the best possible deal.
Great. Matt Whitman. I'm a principal with Wyndham Venture Partners. We're located here in New York City, just next door. We manage about $100 million in AUM across 2 funds. Our focus is really medtech, diagnostics, and digital health. And we're hopeful with our next fund that we'll be able to do some therapeutics investing. We look for companies with great management teams, with innovative technology, with some level of clinical proof of that efficacy and or consumer ROI. We're typically most comfortable in Series A, Series B area, check sizes from 1 to 3 million. But like Jonathan, we'll do seed, we'll do Series E. We play across the full spectrum if we like the technology and if we like the management team. Myself, I was an investment banker for 8 years and just joined Wyndham back in April. So I'm happy to be on the buy side now. I was most recently at Morgan Stanley, where I was the co-head of the healthcare IT investment banking practice, covered healthcare services generally.
Okay, thank you. Pretty kind of diverse panel. To those audience members who kind of walked in late, I just welcome. I just want to highlight that if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll incorporate that into our discussion. So digital health is extremely diverse. Okay. I assume you have gatekeepers through each one of your organizations. So if I send you a pitch, are you personally going to be reading it, or is there somebody else that is going to be looking at it first? Are you so you're the guy. So what does it take to get you interested in my project? What kind of matrix are you looking for?
So I can start. So there's probably 3 things you could look at. There's the team, the market, or the product technology. I would say our team spends more time looking at the team. So is this a team or an individual that's kind of been successful in the past? Or are they coming out of institution where they've developed direct market knowledge about something and they've found a problem to go after and solve? So that's kind of the first gate that we probably look at is kind of the team, and then we'll primarily, depending on the stage, because it varies. If it's an earlier stage company, we might spend more time looking at the market. So is this a market that has a lot of competition? Is it one that's expanding? Is there a lot of problems in it? And then if it's a later stage company, we might spend more time looking at the technology or the if it's a service company, some sort of metrics around profitability and expansion and growth opportunities, just because there's actually more to look at there. Our view is, at the very early stage, the team is there, the market's there, and the product's probably going to change a couple times over its early stages. So we'll spend more time on the team and the market.
So we get one vote for the team.
Yeah.
Do you bet on the jockey or do you bet on the horse? You're betting on the jockey.
Yes.
Okay, so we have one vote for the jockey. Good, John?
I bet on the racetrack.
The racetrack.
Just trying to confuse everyone. No, so for us, honestly, we have a very clear rubric, which is we kind of know the market. We're a hospital, so we know the market, and that's what we do. I mean, this is not a separate fund or anything like that. So we're in the service of the hospital. So what we're doing is we're delivering strategic value more than anything else. So if we look at something, we say this is a problem that we have. We recognize we're pretty good at saying, okay, this is either an NYP specific problem or this is a general hospital problem. So take the example of one of our recent investments, a company called Secara. So Secara is a company that's basically working to build a voice-first assistant for clinicians. So enable them to speak and actually turn that into documentation in the EMR. In fact, allow orders to go through that way. A number of other things, basically reducing the amount of time a physician has to sit in front of a computer and just sit there typing, not looking at the patient or document what they like to call pajama time, which is trying to remember everything they did during the day and then typing that into a computer. And the way we came at that is we actually went around to our senior leadership. We said, what do you see as the key problems? And the number one thing that came up on everyone's list is our clinicians are feeling burned out and they're wasting too much time documenting. And so instead of throwing out the EMR, we actually tried to find a solution for that. And that's actually, we did a market scan and actually found one company we thought was interesting, went to another investor, said, oh, we're looking at this one. He said, oh, you should check out Secara. And that's how we came together. So for us, it's really figuring out, number one, is this a fit with what our issues are? And then we bring it to our transformation team and maybe other internal experts, depending on what it is, and say, okay, what do you think of the technology? Here's a few others we've seen. And we'll do a rapid cycle evaluation, understand where the technology is. Then we'll take a look at the team. Is the team credible? Things like that. But we're, I think we have confidence is overstating it, but we feel pretty good that we're able to, if we identify what we think is the best solution, then we can work with them, and at least it'll get them far enough along that they'll have an outcome in life of what our interests are.
So usually in our world, we have a solution in search of a problem, but you're kind of the opposite. You've identified the problem and you're in search of the best solution out there.
I see plenty of solutions in search of problems. Most of them rhyme with rock chain.
Yeah, I'm wrong. Can you clarify? But so how do I? So I know you have a list of problems that you're trying to address. How do I know that I have a solution that I need to submit to you to address one of your problems? Do you advertise those problems? Is it on your website?
No, they're not on our website. I think that's probably a step too far for our legal team. But what I would say is that, and I think probably, my hunch is you'd agree, but feel free to disagree on this, is that honestly, we don't find a lot of stuff successfully that just comes in through the front door. If you've got something in enough credibility, it's a sort of an interesting litmus test, is that if you've got enough sort of oomph and credibility and things like that, you have a way of finding a way to us. And that could be you've spoken to enough of our, other investors that we know, out in the Valley, out in New York, out in Boston, whatever it is, because we'll go around and tell all those guys what our problems are. And so we'll, work through the network that way. We'll also talk to our portfolio companies and just let them know what we're up to, and they'll say, hey, here's another interesting company, I've seen in my travels. If you're solely existing sort of in a vacuum and no one's ever heard of you, it's not a good argument for the strength of your ability to build business.
So basically a warm introduction for you
Makes a big difference.
99% of the time, that's what you're looking for.
We have found some stuff that just comes in right over the transom, but it's not the typical way.
Very good. Matt?
Yeah, so we're a bit of we take a bit of a hybrid approach because we're doing both medtech and diagnostics on one side and digital health on the other. I think it's easier to pivot on the digital health side, and for that reason, management is everything. And so, like Jeff, we're jockeys, or we're betting on the jockey in that space. On the diagnostic and medtech side, it's more about the technology, it's more about the market, and particularly if you've already done clinical trials, it's harder to pivot at that point. And so even if you have terrific management, if we're not believers in science, we're probably not going to invest. Management is certainly very important on both sides, but I think on the digital health side, it's even that much more important.
So the jockey, and I just want to interject as well, that we typically look at, first and foremost, the team. Three things we look at: the team, the team, the team. Especially nowadays when you have the relaxation of potential relaxation of the FDA regulations with regard to software, that pre-certification proposal that has been circulating around. And for those that may not be aware, right now, you write software, it has to go through the FDA and get approval. And the proposal from the FDA is that we're going to basically pre-certify the company system. And then as you're doing updates to your software, you can release it without FDA review under a trust but verified process. So it introduces an opportunity for existing companies, existing software, digital health companies, to get a leg up on those who are not pre-certified. And therefore, we want to make sure that whatever team we go with have the capability to maintain a really tight ship, so they get, number one, that pre-certification, and number two, later on, we don't run into some unforeseen problems with how they manage their digital codes and so forth. So there's a lot of nuances over there. So we look at a well-managed team, seasoned team is great. But of course, there's always the first-time entrepreneur. Out of curiosity in this audience, is there anybody who's first-time entrepreneur? All right, welcome. So addressing those in the audience who are in fact first-time entrepreneurs, we all mentioned that it's important to focus on the jockey. And my recommendation has always been that first-time entrepreneurs need to target individuals within firms, specific VCs, rather than the firm itself. Okay, so you need to develop a relationship. Okay, I assume you guys all agree it's fairly obvious.
We're a small team, so we all talk about everything. But it's not like there's, in our case, there's not like 4 GPs or something like that. So
Okay, but the building of the relationship has to be there.
Yes.
You got to be comfortable with the team. So somebody right out of the blue sends you information about their project, a pitch deck. You want to meet with them, right? You want to make sure that obviously the technology works in the digital health space. You know, there's a lot of checking and verification that you need to do, and so forth and so forth. But that warm handshake, make sure that you can trust that individual. That's your number one priority.
And lots of people do spray and pray. Like, totally understand, been there, but try to hide that fact as best as you can. I get a lot of things where you get the forwarded email and you can see the what was pasted and what was changed.
Yeah.
It's like, just check that.
So in a pitch deck, anecdotally, is there anything that you just you get your goat on pitch decks? Is there a hot button issue that you see, that you say, everybody stop doing this?
Like in a good way or a bad way?
In a bad way.
Oh, okay.
The one thing I've seen a lot is when you have your customer logo page and you have a lot of logos that are up there that might not be actual customers, because, and this is really strange, and we actually find this out a lot in diligence, where you might have a logo of NYP, and then I'll call John, and John will say, oh, we met with them a couple times, but they might be in our pipeline, but they're actually not customers right now. And if you're trying to build, as you said, a really good relationship with the entrepreneur and trusting, so that you're essentially getting married to this person, and if there's going to be a lot of highs and lows, you have to go with that. Essentially breaks the trusting relationship from day one. So that's just one thing to be careful of that I've seen, like in 20% of the pitch decks. I don't know if you guys are disagree. Yeah.
I mean, we've come across situations where in reviewing a sales pipeline, we'll have an entrepreneur say, oh, well, we're going to level with you. Here's the health system we're talking to. We're 99% there, we're really close. We'll probably be signing a contract in the next few weeks, and we'll have some contact points with that organization, and without directly speaking to them, we can get feedback on a product and find out that they're actually nowhere near close to 99% signing a contract. So to Jeff's point, really important to establish that level of trust early on and just be candid. As investors, we get that it's early and we don't expect to have 10 or 15 clients signed up right out of the gate. So just be candid, and it really goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this happen. I had one investor call me and it's like, oh, so-and-so said they're selling product to you. And I was like, no, in fact, we decided not to buy this stuff, and now we're definitely not buying this stuff. And that's another pet peeve. It's like seeing our logo in your deck. You cannot use our logo. That is our property. You can't run around with our logo. That belongs to us. That is something of value, and it's actually it's actually theft of intellectual property. And our legal team is really, really itchy about that sort of thing. Because you put our logo in our deck, people think you're associated with New York Presbyterian. And we spent 247 years building that logo. So don't do that, please. So that's one thing. I would say another sort of big bugaboo is when someone comes and pitches something that just doesn't show an understanding of how healthcare works. Well, two things. One is either they make too much of an effort to try and explain how healthcare works. You don't need to tell me, you don't need to spend 15 minutes of our 30-minute time explaining healthcare to me. I work in healthcare, I totally get it. You can skip to the chase. But the second part is, something like, I don't have a great example to bring forward, but it's like something that completely changes clinician workflow. Or something like, here's this new thing that's going to make this incremental improvements, and we're going to charge a fortune for it. Well, who the hell's going to buy that these days? So it's just things that are sort of not mindful of the way healthcare works. I see that a lot of times entrepreneurs coming from outside healthcare who they want to change the world, which is fantastic that folks want to get into healthcare and do things that have social value. But if you're not mindful of the real context, and we've seen this with very successful entrepreneurs, in fact, folks who've done really well, and then they come into healthcare and they're like, well, we can just do this. And we're like, yeah, so what? It seems like great from the outside that seems like a big problem, but when we look at the list of problems that we have, technology only solves about 5% of the problem. The other 95% is people and process. And if you are not mindful of that people and process part, it's just going to fail.
For me, the number one bug is the financial projections page. In your pitch decks, who has a financial projection? Okay? Are you making any money today? Any revenue?
Yes.
Okay. Then we can talk. Okay? But if you're pre-revenue, okay, and you have 3, 4, 5-year financial outlook, okay, why is it even in there? All right? I understand you need to kind of justify it to yourself internally as to the viability and the opportunity. But for us, it doesn't make any sense, okay? There are partnering opportunities that you may not have thought of that we can offer, for example. That changes everything, all right? There are many hurdles. People tend to be overly optimistic in terms of the growth outlook, let's put it that way, okay? And also on the timeline, you know, where healthcare is very risk averse, okay, so change is very slow. So explaining to me that the market opportunity in 2 or 3 years is $500 million, well, that's the market, that's not you, number one, okay? So we're getting into all these discussions over just one page. And my team, the first thing that they do is they take out the financial, anything financial related in the pitch deck before I see it. They know I just go nuts on that, right? And then later on, as if the team is there and if the solution is something that aligns with what we do, then we can talk about the financials. We typically look at things that we know a lot about, so we can make our own assessment in terms of the forward forecasting opportunity and so forth. So you don't need to kind of educate us. And in fact, one of the things that we look for in terms of the team is somebody who is coachable, okay? By that, what I'm saying is that if you're a first-time entrepreneur, there's a lot of things that they don't teach you in business school, okay? That we would like to present to you and have you listen to us a little bit and see if in fact it aligns with what the best practices that we think you should incorporate. So if you have financial projections and you're making no money, okay, it's just you're introducing a lot of aggravation into the discussion. And my recommendation is just take it out of the discussion, especially in the first pitch, 20-minute pitch session. You can always get to that later on if you're asked back. But get it out of it.
The only thing I'd just throw on top of that is I would say one thing we do like to see is if you understand the unit economics of what you're selling. Because even if you're not putting projections in, you got to know how it works. I've seen things, projections that go out and like, okay, you have 60 staff and you're doing 200 million in sales or something. That's one of the things I'll look for is like, I don't believe any projections. They never come true. If you're really lucky, you blow through them. And then most of them, and I've done this plenty of times, so they never succeed. But even if, irrespective of whether they're going to come true or not, I want to see if you understand how the business works. And that's the one thing I can glean from your projections, even if the rest of it's all just made up.
Fair enough. Now, another thing that we see typically is that a lot of, especially super early stage, they start fundraising way too late. Okay? There's we need money in 6 months, 10 months. In terms of the turnaround for you guys, how quick are you in terms of looking at a deal and making a decision and having funds available? Is that something that can be done in 30 days, 60 days?
I would probably say for our funds, we involve our strategic partners in the decision-making process. So sometimes it takes a week or two to get 10 people in a room in a health system. As John knows, that's not the easiest thing to do sometimes. So I would say our process is usually 90 days from start to finish, from first meeting to close.
And you do it, your decision is by committee or?
Yeah, that's our initial committee. So we'll start with maybe a single phone call of 30 or 50 or 60 minutes, and then maybe a week after that we'll maybe do another call with kind of a broader team. And if there's real interest, then we'll start to do a little bit of diligence and maybe start to meet in person, and then we'll really get into diligence and then think about, depending if we're leading or following, start to think about term sheets and those types of effects. And then once we get approval for a deal, we probably need 7 days to close, or I don't know the exact terms.
Now, if I recall, you have an existing fund that you're focused on right now.
We're no longer making new investment out of that fund. We are closing a new fund mid-December. That will be about $100 million.
Okay, so that's kind of an important piece because the earlier part of the fund, you're willing to take on additional risk than you would normally.
Correct.
Okay.
Fund life cycle, yeah, essentially, yeah.
Okay, and when are you going to be working on this?
We'll probably start making investments in January, February of next year, I would say, just because of the holiday season.
Right.
It'd be hard to do something in that in December.
Okay. And in terms of turnaround for you, John?
I would get funds out the door in 24 hours. Well, getting wire transfers done usually pretty easy. The other parts, it depends. I mean, we've had things take 6 months. We've had things take 60 days. It all kind of depends You know, the funny thing I see these days is like, a lot of companies, companies that are doing really well in a hot market, it's like, we get this, oh, we're not raising any funds, we're not raising any funds, oh, the deal closes next week. Well, clearly you're raising funds because you got a lead all lined up. We don't need anything, so you got a lead all lined up, you got all these things. So, one is give us a little bit more warning, we can get through this stuff faster. I think our investment committee meets monthly. Holidays are always tricky, but our investment committee meets monthly. We can always pull them together sooner if necessary. It's more sort of, we don't invest in things that we don't really use, because of that strategic priority. So it's more figuring out that piece of things is what takes a little bit more time often. The investment itself, when that happens, we've done things in 5 days, I think. And that's mainly kind of reviewing the documents, going back and forth on them, especially if, one of the things honestly I've found is, okay, here's a set of documents. All right, is that the final documents? No. Okay, and then I finally get the final documents. Okay, here's the final documents. It closes in 7 days. No, it does not close in 7 days. We use our own attorneys. They have other things to do. Don't create artificial deadlines that don't need to exist like that.
Can I just say one other thing? A lot of the deals that we've done, we've actually developed relationships over many, many years with the entrepreneur. So it's very rare that we'll meet an entrepreneur and then 90 days later be investors. We're only making 3 or 4 investments a year, so we really want to make sure we have a good relationship with that. So like, for example, SciOps with Glenn, I met him in 2009 and we invested in 2016. So it was a very different company, but we got to know each other really well over that time period.
But you feel comfortable in that investment?
Yeah.
Okay, so trust, building relationships. And Matt, any quick turnaround?
It's rare. I think the quickest is probably 6 to 8 weeks. And in those cases, there's a really well-developed syndicate and a lead investor that we respect. We're not going to defer any diligence to them. We still have to go through our full diligence process. But I think when there's additional pressure coming from a lead investor with whom we have a good relationship, we're going to expedite our processes as much as we possibly can. Kind of without that additional pressure, if it's just sort of a soft deadline from a company that's raising funds with sort of a month or 2 window for closing, then we'll take the time and we'll continue to ask questions. We'll continue to speak with as many customers or principal investigators that we possibly can. And things can happen while you're doing your diligence that could change the thesis a little bit. So if there's additional time that we can take, we'll take it.
Just one quick thing to note there. If you're thinking about if you want a strategic to be in your round, maybe set up 2 closes and give yourself enough time in the documents, because I've seen this happen. Give yourself enough time in the documents and push your lead investor to give yourself enough time in the documents to get that second close done, knowing that strategics take longer, because we've seen some that have sort of exploding deals, and then the board's got to go back and do another resolution. You waste time on the legal fee, you waste time and money with the legal department, your own lawyer, sorry. And it's just wasted money when you could have just given yourself a little bit more flexibility.
So basically always be raising funds. If you have an idea, start raising funds today. It takes some time. For us, I guess since it's a family office, basically we have, 1 or 2 people deciding on specific deals. So we can make a quick decision, especially if a deal comes to us through somebody that we've known for many, many years, or it's technology that has been recommended by one of our portfolio companies, something that they might be using. And typically what we'd like to do is, I guess there's no typical, but many times, what we'd like to do is partner with that particular project, let's say as a first customer, to basically understand more comprehensively the value proposition that they offer and the team that we're going to be looking at. If they're not responsive to problems, it's something that as a customer we would be very aware of. So, like I said, if you have an idea, start thinking about the fundraising and line up your pitch deck, the proposition as soon as possible. You'll be iterating that over time, but first-time entrepreneurs, expect that. I see we have about 10 minutes, and I did promise the audience questions, so I think we'll take it right there.
I have this question for Jonathan. I presume that some of the companies that you invest are spin-off from NYP. You don't invest in your own spin-off?
Well, I'll let you finish your question, then I'll answer.
Yeah, my question was relevant to the role of management or jockey. Those ideas typically come from researchers and clinicians. Where do you get the management team that you need to complement the scientific?
Got it. So I can definitely only answer the first part of your question, which is that we only do, so I look at it as there's two types of this sort of strategic investing on the part of health systems. One is this sort of inside out, Mayo was just up here, Cleveland Clinic, HSS to a smaller extent, what should we call it, partners. Those guys are doing it really, really well. They've got established funds and things like that. We do outside in, so we're looking for external innovation that we're bringing in. Some of that is a result of our structure. We are affiliated with Weill Cornell and Columbia, but they employ the academic clinicians. And so they're the ones that actually have the IP, typically. So to date, we have not invested in anything that's come out of either school. I mean, there are some joint royalty agreements and things like that, but we have not deployed capital into any of those companies. I would say, to my understanding from some best practices of others, sometimes folks will have sort of panels of entrepreneurs that they'll use to vet ideas. So the tech transfer office or the venture office will have sort of an external advisory group, and then they'll sometimes spin those out into those folks, or they'll have just sort of folks that they stay in touch with that are in the community. And that's where the power of an ecosystem really comes in. If you're in a place, I don't want to rag on New York, but frankly, we're behind a place like Boston or San Francisco in terms of having that pool of entrepreneurial executive talent that's ready and available. It's just like investing in a company, just having this sort of Rolodex of folks you can call and say, I got this biotech idea. I remember you did X, Y, and Z. This is another thing that goes in your CRM, so you know who to call when you've got, a CRISPR thing, and you can say, okay, this person did some CRISPR work or something like that, and let's see if we can put these two together.
I think this is also highlights the importance of reacting to a no decision from a VC or from any investor. That no is just temporary, okay? I got your information, it may not be right for us at this point, but later on, it might be something that we would be interested in, or if somebody calls us up, we'll be more than happy to refer that individual to that solution. So I see many, especially early stage entrepreneurs, first time entrepreneurs, are like, this is the 7th or 8th time I've met with an investor. They said no. I'm very disappointed. Guess what? No is normal, okay? The yes is that rare exception. But the no lets you get onto somebody's Rolodex. I guess, do we still use Rolodexes anymore? LinkedIn account. And if you're on their radar, then it's a better opportunity for you later on to be aligned with that particular individual. Maybe not necessarily in that particular project, okay? Maybe it's another project. But that's kind of the importance of reacting well to no. Don't get disappointed, but it's just an opportunity for you to hone your skills and move on to the next investor. Eventually you'll get the yes. Sir?
What area in digital health are you most interested in now?
Me personally? We look at big data analytics, AI. We have AI engines in genomics, in molecular diagnostics. We also like to do what I call cross-pollinating. We have non-life science projects in our portfolios, like robotics, for example. So some of the AI from the genomic guys goes over to the robotics and vice versa, and it just keeps the intellectual capability more acute and fresh. You have to maintain a team and people get bored, okay? So you want to give them an opportunity to move to a different project and maybe they'll come back to you. So one of our benefits of our ecosystem as a family office, we're able to kind of step in and provide people more options in terms of the career paths. So that's kind of our value add in addition to just capital. But are you looking for anything specific today? What can I get you?
Okay, right. So I would say most of the people we work with or organizations we work with are either taking on a lot of risk or trying to shift into value-based care. So over the last probably 6 months, we've been spending a lot of time thinking through kind of what that path looks like for the patients. So everything from patient attribution. So am I actually seeing John Gordon, or is it another John Gordon when he presents to the ER? Risk stratification. Who are my high risk, but who are my increasing risk? And because those are the ones that I really want to go after. How do I engage with that patient once I identify them? Should I text them? Should I call them? Should I send someone to their house? And then once I know who they are and how to engage with them, what kind of interventions can I send to them? Should I give them something like Omada, or should I give them something like Propeller, depending on what they have? And then thinking through kind of, okay, I've done all of this. What are the analytics to help me do it better the next time? So kind of thinking through that whole value chain is kind of where we've been spending a lot of time recently. I know John's too, so. It's a good one.
I gotta make it different.
We'll do Matt. How about that?
So, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, for us, we think the clinical trial process is really inefficient. Any tools that can help improve that process for pharma are quite interesting to us. If it's remote monitoring, it's going to give you continuous data instead of having trial participants show up at a center once every 3 months. Anything that's establishing new clinical endpoints that can help drugs get approved remotely is really interesting. Like Jeff, we think value-based care is a really interesting space as well. Anything that can help keep patients from going back to the hospital. Anything that addresses social determinants of health. How do you reach and keep engaged your most vulnerable patient population? Most of those tools are probably a combination of technology and kind of boots on the ground to some extent, but it's a very interesting problem that we're focused on. So those are two big areas for us.
Have you looked at the Hawthorne effect?
No?
They're a clinical trial support company for cardiology out of California. I think that if you're interested, I can.
See, that's how business is done. Life in action.
So, yeah, I would say two things that we find interesting right now. One is continuing the broader application of language technology. So we made 2 investments in language technology, which is, I guess, probably you could call it a subset of AI. Although, frankly, these days, I think we're getting to the point where, saying AI as a category is like saying mobile or internet as a category. Everything's going to have some AI in it. In fact, things that don't need AI even have AI in them these days. But like your fridge is going to have AI. But what I would say is language technology, applying it to all kinds of applications within healthcare to unlock the power of enormous amounts of unstructured data that's just, or even just data that's just not generally available for machine processing. And so we stick a lot of humans on those jobs, and those humans can be used for much more high-value tasks. So thinking about what we can leverage from that standpoint, and NLU is kind of getting further along where it's actually starting to be usable. And the second is and we're still trying to figure out, like, is this a good venture model or not? But is any tools that fall in the digital therapeutics category. Ours are, we're more interested in the inpatient side of things. There are things like Pear Therapeutics that is, doing a lot of stuff around addiction, stuff like that. That's not as much an inpatient thing. But we're starting to take a look at things like, can we reduce anxiety? Can we reduce seclusion, restraint usage in our psychiatric units by leveraging things like VR? I'm still not entirely sure what the defensive moat is for a VR company. That still remains to be seen, but what I would say is that in terms of an application, that's really interesting to us. We haven't, these are all things that we've treated in a biochemical way in the past, and the biochemical ways have their limitations. We're getting the book.
Did we answer your question?
Yes.
All right, I think we are basically out of time.
Yes.
You've heard this. Thank you very much, panel, for all your insights. If there are any solutions in the room that fit your problems, things you're looking for. I'm sure that
I got 90 minutes.
coming up here and talking to you. So thanks very much.